Okay, this morning I want to have a chat to you about, essentially about your life, about non-education, about disinformation, about willful ignorance, about rationality and irrationality, about this cult of data that we live in, about the compartmentalisation of imagination, about the dismissal of most of the tools that are the means by which you can construct your life. So what brought this on was this morning when I first woke up, I grabbed my phone to have a look at the weather, and then I went and had a look at a thread that I'd been involved in on Facebook, essentially concerning making healthy choices about what you eat. And I'd been hammered because I didn't have all the data available to back up my claim that essentially takeaway food is not really a healthy choice, and that the marketing of the corporate versions of takeaway food to children is something that is ethically intolerable. And somebody else on the thread actually compared some of that food to a drug. Now, essentially, I personally think that that is valid because the food is constructed in such a way as to become addictive. Now, what happened this morning was, while I was asleep, somebody in the thread had utilised my fasting as an illustration of me putting myself at risk in the same way that people that eat takeaway food often are putting themselves at risk, and therefore I'm willfully making myself a tax burden by endangering my life. This is on many levels an invalid argument, mainly because I'm actually doing the opposite, and there is plenty of evidence, and there have been thousands if not millions of people before me who have utilised this as a means of actually enhancing their health and raising themselves to a new level of health and well-being. Now, that's kind of beside the point of what I'm getting at. At the moment, I'm still waking up with a raised heartbeat. I'm still struggling with my emotional equilibrium. That's a difficult word to say, equilibrium. Essentially, I fly off the handle quite quickly at the moment, which is reasonably unnatural for me. I like to consider myself a reasonable and calm person most of the time. But all of this is based in thought patterns in my head, along with obvious continuing overload of adrenaline and things like that my body is at the moment learning to reverse. So essentially, I read that post this morning, I got pretty upset pretty quickly, and I fired back. Now, probably not the best thing to do, but there you go. But it's interesting that I'm getting quite a lot of comments now concerned with my health and well-being, and that what I'm doing is risking my health. This sort of thinking essentially comes from a Western mindset, which ignores any sort of evidence that isn't based inside our concept of science. Now, the evidence for what I'm doing at the moment is thousands and thousands of years old. The evidence is that many people have done this before me for many reasons and have reaped many different and significant benefits, not the least being the center point of the major religion of our culture. Now, the dismissal of that is that apparently he was able to go 40 days through divine intervention. This, of course, ignores all the other cultures who have similar fasting methods, because, of course, our culture dismisses all their religions because their gods aren't real and theirs is. That in itself is, I won't even deal with that. That's ridiculous. So this is where the fear comes in. People are fearful of anything that they don't understand, that they don't recognize, that seems different, that seems irrational. Rationality. We're all meant to be rational all the time in this culture. If you're not rational and you get labelled as irrational, then obviously you're not worth spending the time of day with, because you have nothing of value to contribute. Let's have a consideration of this irrationality. Irrationality to me, and this is my personal opinion, I may be wrong, but to me irrationality a lot of the time is linked with imagination and ideas of trying to expand your environment, expand your life. That's frowned on to the point of getting you labelled as some sort of freak in our culture. Now this is very useful to the powers that be, because this essentially keeps most of us locked in our tiny little boxes. We essentially are forbidden to be irrational. We're forbidden to make use of our imagination, apart from the little approved box that you're meant to be imaginative and meant to use your creativity. Like, what I mean by that is, okay, I work in the music industry. Now, I mix records and I produce records. What this means is I'm part of the creative process. Now, the artist, they're meant to be musically creative and lyrically creative, and that's essentially their little creative box. I'm meant to be creative as a producer. I'm meant to walk in every day, and my creativity extends to providing the environment for the artist to enhance their creativity. So that's a lot of my job. My creativity gets called on sometimes in arrangement of the music, sometimes in lyrical content, sometimes in all sorts of things. But that's my box. And as a mix engineer, I walk in, I sit down in front of a song, and I'm meant to click my imagination into gear, which is, essentially the doorway to our creativity, and be creative with this artist's song, to mix all these components in such a way that it breathes some life and some meaning and some, maybe even shine a new light, some fresh insight onto what the heart of this song is. But that's where I'm meant to use my creativity.